The Awoken are some of the most mysterious beings in the Destiny universe. A secret race living beyond the asteroid belt with magical superweapons, crow forces, a queen, and tons more. But how did all of that come to be? Where did the Awoken come from, and why are they in this position in our solar system now? Let's discuss that today. Alright Guardians, welcome back to the channel. Super excited to jump into today's video, and Forsaken is releasing very soon, so this is going to be a pretty hot topic. During the collapse, humanity began to flee as the Traveler's ancient enemy arrived in the solar system. Remnants of this can still be seen throughout Destiny's world today. An example of this was the colony ship Exodus Red. This particular ship had a launch failure in the Cosmodrome, leaving thousands of people stranded on board. Their bodies are still up there and decomposing to this very day. Now, the goal of these colony ships at first was to get humans away from Earth, whether it was simply to move them to a new planet to colonize or fleeing from the Traveler's ancient enemy. These ships had incredible power and were capable of long-range travel in the Sol system. Among the asteroids drifts the Reef, lashed together from the ruined ships of the ancient Exodus. Here, the Queen rules over the Awoken. These colony ships are where we begin our explanation of how the Awoken came to be. So we begin with something called Project Emrita. Long ago, Mara and Uldren, who is Uldren before he became Awoken, took part in this Emrita project aboard a colony ship called the Yang Liwei. At this point, the people on this particular ship wanted humanity to break away from the teachings of the Traveler, to not depend on it and rebuild on their own. Now this is super important right here because Mara and Uldren were normal humans and the Awoken didn't even exist at this point. In the 4 Cosmogyre cards, we learn of this Yang Liwei ship and how it was a part of the Exodus Green. This ship was carrying passengers that were trying to flee Earth, the Traveler, and run away from an impending attack by an ancient alien force. While on board, the captain calls a vote to see what the crew wants to do, either return home to Earth where chaos is breaking out everywhere, or continue onward. Now here, Mara in her head wants to return. Her initial thought was like most of them though, to leave the system, start a new life elsewhere, and leave all of Earth's problems behind, so Uldren says this. She doesn't think she's giving anything away, but somehow he knows. Mara, he looks up frowning, his face bigger and brighter than the distant sun. You want to go back, don't you? You're going to vote to return. So Uldren convinces her this is the right choice, to keep going and, live among the stars and leave Earth in the dust. At that moment, the ship begins experiencing some crazy gravitational forces and the darkness ensues on their location. It surrounds them all around. Mara then decides to tether herself to the hull so she can die in starlight, but there's a problem because all that's here is darkness. She drifts further and further as Uldren shouts for her. Simultaneously, the captain is trying to communicate with the darkness, saying this. This is the interstellar vessel Yang Liwei to the entity interacting with us. We are not involved with your dispute with the powers around this star. We are on a mission to begin a new life elsewhere. Our purpose is orthogonal to yours. We request your indifference. At that moment, the Traveler then unleashes a wave of light throughout the solar system. Mara can even see it through these dark shadows. With both the light and the darkness in this area, this creates an anomaly, which basically absorbs the entire Yang Liwei ship into a pocket dimension known as the distributary. We then come to the Ecstasy cards. These cards begin with a character called Alice Lee, who was the first person to awake in this new dimension, and who would eventually become the first Queen of the Awoken. So after she travels around for a bit, she finds Mara, who is the second Awoken to have risen after the Yang was transported. What am I? Mara whispers. The second, the woman says. I'm Alice. I think you were Mara? The sky behind Alice blooms with stars, a haze of light like sun through mist, richer than the galactic core. Across that night sky arches an impossible twin shape of double planetary ring. Mara gasps in wonder. I remember, she says. I was on the tether. The sudden need to keep this memory a secret shuts her mouth. We're on a world, she says instead. Alice Lee then tells Mara she found something and wants to show it to her. This, I believe, turns out to be their ship or something else, and they begin to pass inside of it, and Mara says this. There should be others, Mara says afterward. There was room for others, thousands of others. Where are they? They're in the same place you came from. We have to make them real. Lee stares at Mara, and coruscations of white fire map the tiny lines and furrows of her skin. Her bright eyes narrow. Why were you the second? Why in particular? I don't know, Mara lies. It was the first lie ever told, the first secret kept. Finding the location of the others, they began to awake one by one. In time, the Awoken spilled across the face of the world, and their number was 40,891. Now, the Awoken called out for a name to distinguish their world from Unworld. The 891 said to the 40,000, "Let this world be named Tributary, for we dream of a great river from which we have parted." They then held a council discussing their existence and how all of this came to be. Alice Lee, the first Awoken, spoke first, but Uldren urged others to listen to Mara. From this council, there arose 8 verdicts and a 9th. First, that the people were awoken and they were immortal. Second, this world was the tributary of another, but that it was forbidden to seek any way to rejoin the mother stream. For this reason, it would be called the distributary, for that was the proper name for a river that branches from a mother and does not return. Third, that the Awoken should simply multiply in wombs of flesh and machine, but only after the most careful forecast of population and ecology, and only under the supervision of those who knew good technology, for each new child would be immortal. Fourth, that those wise in good technology should be heralded and heeded, so that this technology could be preserved. Fifth, that the woman should hold care and protection of the men and others until more can be born. Sixth, the purpose of the Awoken should be to know and love the cosmos. Seventh, the Awoken were created out of the covenant with light and darkness, but this covenant was complete, and no other debt would ever be called except the duty of the second verdict to remain on the distributary. Eighth, that the Awoken were whole in themselves and they existed in balance. And ninth, that there would be no vote, but instead Alice Lee would be recognized as queen. Her first pronunciation was that there would be no secrets among the Awoken. It seems this 9th one here was made because she knew sort of about Mara's following. Next we come to the Theodicy cards. In those days there was a great birth of adventure among the Awoken. Hunters and pioneers sought the shape of the world, sailors charted the rivers and perimeter of seas, and astronomers plotted the motion of the crowded heavens. Over this age ruled Queen Alice Lee, whose work was the creation of agriculture and the preservation of the technology that she had deciphered from the ship's spire. But there remained in the forest many tribes of huntresses who preferred their light-footed freedom from control and duty to the painstaking surplus of the city. Among these tribes, Mara lived with her brother whose name had returned to Uldren and with Osana, who is her mother. It is said that Osana lived as a negotiator and that her son brought her news from the other tribes, for he was a scout and hunter of renown. Mara dwelt alone on a mountaintop. So the Awoken began to thrive in this new world and roles began to form. Alice Lee was the first queen and had clear goals in mind, but soon came under fire from her own people, like this woman Diaserum who said this: "I accuse the queen of deicide." When she was questioned, she spoke of a foundational crime. Alice Lee was the first to awaken in this world, the Diaserum preached. She set the terms of our existence. We could have been gods free of want or suffering. Instead, Alice Lee chose our mortal form. Our queen is complicit in all the pain we experience. The queen murdered all our unborn godheads. At the thought that the queen without secrets had kept this most appalling secret to herself, the city folk were troubled deeply. Thus, this began the Theodicy War. Alice Lee questions this madness, saying it shouldn't have happened. She then had a long conversation with Mara, explaining that the mission was to carry on the human journey in a new world. They then talk for a bit about the problem, and Alice says, "I want to end this war. I want to negotiate peace. I need your mother's help. What would you ask in exchange?" Mara smiles graciously and bows her head. Nothing but a future boon. Now there entered into the Diaserum's camp Osana, mother of Mara, famed for her skill in negotiating contested land. She had come with her son Uldren, who would win a place in a camp for his beauty and also the regal crow eagle on his shoulder. "I came from Mara," said Osana, whose heart was frozen in her chest. If you will end the killing, she will tell you any secret you desire. Osana then spoke with the diastrum and resolved the conflict within the area. And although there soon was peace, Queen Lee's guilt lay heavy upon her shoulders, and after an age of peace and progress, she abdicated to a new queen. In this next card, Heresiology, we learn Mara was behind the Echolus and the diastrum was actually her pawn. She allowed the Theodicy war because she was afraid we'd be too comfortable here, and also that Queen Alice would need her help politically. Mara couldn't afford to be the most radical dissident. She had to seem moderate for her beliefs to thrive. So Asana, their mother, reveals what Mara truly did between her, Mara, and Uldren, and they all discuss it for a bit. Uldren then remembers the day they were born, when the gravity stretched them into agonizing ribbons of flesh near the Hall of the Yang Liwei. At the end of this, Mara proposes a journey and says, I have star charts to share and heresies to tend to, and a new eagle crow to find for her bereft brother. Next, the imponent cards. From all of this conflict came many things. First, we have the Gensum scribes who were sent on these mad quests to basically test reality. These scribes also recorded their frustration with Mara and Uldren. Things like it is said that the two would wander the land together, gathering lore and portents, and also ancient prophecies of sorts that kind of weren't supposed to be found. Back in the court entered a woman of stellar height and furious wrath. I am Jur Ito, said the woman, and I accuse Mara of an ancient murder of my lady the Diasrim. In my saddle I have a weapon with only one death remaining. Take me to Mara and I will deliver it. So the scribes consulted to each other and said that this foul murder might prevent another Theodicy war. So they basically gave Jur all of the knowledge to hunt Mara and said, go kill her, maybe this will help us in the long run and prevent one of these wars from ever happening again. From here we also had a new queen rise named Nuya Pin. Queen Nuya Pin declared she was now an avowed Echolist and that the queen would lead a quest to identify whatever debt the Awoken owed to the cosmos. It was time to pursue a dream beloved to all Awokens, the conquest of space and the assessment of the true shape and age of their universe. The ancient court and the queen gave these Gensum scribes a place to lay down their pride and act as equals. Soon the greatest engineers in the world assembled in the queen's court, and whatever wealth or resources they required flowed freely. We then come back to Jur Ado, the one who wants to fight Mara. She then came into this feast of ideas. She was searching for a hooded figure that could have been Mara. She then followed one of these hooded figures to her laboratory and watched Mara go to work. She was soldering some type of device to look for gravity waves. Jur Ido's fury and grief whetted themselves against Mara's thoughtless grace and ancient beauty, until at last her heart unseamed itself and spilled its hot blood into a shout. Mara sobbed, she cried, throwing down her Maltac matter laser between them. I cannot live while you live, but I cannot bear to kill you. I challenge you to a duel to the agony. I will fight your most beloved companion to death and leave you forever maimed or else die in the attempt. Mara could not refuse this challenge, so she summoned Uldren. We cannot put it all upon a single fight, Uldren said to the ancient vendetta bearer. Too much would be left to chance. Such an old grudge deserves to be tested well. I propose we fight with blade, with rifle, and with 5th generation air superiority fighters. Jur Ido then accepted these terms. Sometime later, a spy brought word of Jur's intentions to the Gensum scribes. This was a problem because they had given Jur the license to hunt and kill Mara Sov. So if Jur Ido murdered one of the guests of the queen under the scribe's remit, it would mean war and the end of the great Awoken push for space. So the queen and the scribes had a little banter back and forth, and the battle between Uldren and Jur was about to begin. Jur spoke to Mara asking if she cared about Uldren and how he might just die. Mara was calm and the fight began. They fought a while, pulled out their knives, and eventually fell into a coolant pond together. The first fight was a draw, but it was the first to 3. The next fight they used long guns and Jur won, meaning if Uldren lost the next, he was gone for good and Mara let him know about this. In their last fight they would meet in air superiority over the Andaleas. As they took to the skies, Uldren made quick work of Jur and she bent her knee before Mara, saying that her own fate was in Mara's hands and she can do whatever she wanted. From there, Mara told her to stand up and that they would work together. The last card in the set begins with Mara talking to Queen Pin. The queen is upset about what happened with the scribes and so on, and says that Mara will need to find a new queen. So the second queen, Queen Pin there, is kind of, fed up with all this, and she's kind of stepping down as well. There are new stars in the sky. Mara put them there. Huge distributed array telescopes orbit the distributary's cool sun. Gravity wave sensors and cold primordial neutrino detectors spider the crust. Out of shell corporations and seed investments, she has opened her world as an enormous eye and focused it heavenward. Jur-Ida was her smiling public avatar for these past decades. This was while Uldren, her brother, handled the enforcement. The days of covert speed chess in the Queen's court are over. Jur-Ida's open endorsement made Mara the face of Eccleism and armed Mara with blackmail over the Gensum scribes that were still empowered. Yet she has never been so lonely or worried for the future. Mother has told her that Mara uses the power over Uldren too freely, and that she must learn to stop or her mother will no longer be her friend. Mara, Jur says, catching some flickering expression. Knowing Mara well, she immediately changes tack away from comfort. What do you think we'll find with the satellite? Proof that it's time for us to go, Mara says. Proof of what I've known since the beginning. Jur frowns in thought. She doesn't remember much from before her awakening. Few of the 891 do, but enough to trouble her. Time for us to go. The ship's turbines keen up to speed and then settle into a whisper-quiet cruise. Jur reaches to strap herself in across from Mara. Impulsively hard-faced, denying she needs what she is asking for, Mara scoots aside to make room for her on the bench. Jur raises an eyebrow at her. Don't say anything, Mara warns. Not a word. And so they pass the flight in silence, but not alone. So here Mara realizes, it's time to leave the distributary, or basically this whole dimension they were teleported to long ago, and return home. This is what the satellite is for. She's basically sending up there to test things out and find what's the best way to leave. We then come to the Catabasis lore. In this tab, Mara talks to the Awoken people in the distributary about how they exist in this space and what they ultimately need to do. In this realm, thousands of years have passed, but in the outside universe like the Sol system, it was centuries at most. These ideals may not surprise you after centuries of theorizing and philosophy, but we have decrypted new data from the cosmic microwave and neutrino background signals. We have discovered voices, the voices of distress calls. They tell a story of bravery, of war, and desperate loss. We were not always immortal. We did not earn this utopia by covenant with any cosmic power or by attaining an enlightened moral condition. We are refugees. We fled from an apocalyptic clash between our ancestor civilization and an invading power. The signals we have retrieved tell us that our ancestors were on the edge of defeat, perhaps extinction. She then explains that if they return, they will begin to age and they can even die. This immortality or the safe haven they're currently in is for refugees, and they wouldn't have that gift anymore. Will you join me, Awoken? Will you answer my call? All I offer you is hardship and death. All I ask is for everything you can offer. But will you see an older starlight? You will walk in a deeper dark than this world has ever known. Next, the Nye cards. In these cards, Mara is planning to leave back to the Sol system, but meets with the former Queen Alice. They discuss the third and most recent queen, Queen Tel. Mara explains how, Queen Tel has not endorsed her journey, and that she would basically be orchestrating all of this on her own. Mara eventually tells Alice about the truth of what happened during her reign, and pleads she doesn't tell her mother. Again, this was when Mara lied and, caused that whole war long ago. Alice gets really angry and basically tells Mara to leave and, don't come back because she couldn't believe she turned against her and did all that. And lastly, we have the Palingenesis cards. Here we begin Mara's journey back to the system and out of the distributary. As she launches into space, she flashes back to the last conversation with her mother. They sit at her mother's ranch and Osana tells Mara she's not coming with her. Mara sort of understands, but at that moment she flashes back into the ship and it appears something is trying to shoot them down. As Mara struggles to breathe in her suit, she tries to contact her mother one last time, but the screens read no connection. And at that moment, they entered the singularity. So at this point they were back in the Sol system, and the first place they began to set up shop was in a reef of derelict spacecraft, which Uldren had surveyed a bit earlier. Mara told Jur that they would salvage the halls and pull all the materials they could. Once they had a reliable source of gravity, they can start having babies. Jur and the Queen spoke for a bit and realized they had to tell the crew about what happened at Earth. Of course, Mara had suspected that it would be long deserted and, a ruined world, but it seemed otherwise and things were still thriving. Anyway, Guardians, that's all I got for today's video. This is the story of how the Awoken came to be, and it was actually pretty crazy. So first of all, there's all these lore tabs in Forsaken, basically like Books of Sorrow type entries explaining all of this lore, and this is just the beginning. There is parts explaining, what happens after they set up the Reef, but that can be for a whole nother video, and this one is quite long, already up to this point. So let me know down below, what do you think about all of this? These Awoken stem from humans on a colony ship fleeing the darkness during the collapse. At a point where light and dark met, they were transported into this distributary, or a sort of pocket dimension with a beautiful world. They set up shop here for a very long time. Mara gained a following, multiple queens ruled, and then she decided it was time to go home and save her ancestors, to rescue what was out there, and stop the darkness for good. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and subscribe for some more awesome Destiny 2 news and entertainment. Let me know down below what other mysteries and lore would you like to dive into in the future, and I'll catch you Guardians in the next one.